Neil might be able to give a sentence or two about the politics of the authority and how it works for those of you that might not be too sure, and then discuss in the group how we might be able to influence some of these decisions that might directly affect us in our future. So over to Neil.
Okay, thanks, Katie. And yeah, I mean, for me, this goes back to a conversation that Katie and I had probably about a year ago in September, after the National Parks Conference that took place, hosted as a national park. And within that, there was a sort of a session on youth and how they get involved. And what we found out from that session was that there's lots of things going on that try and involve young people all the time, like the Europark Manifesto and the youth forum that we've got here. But what came out of that session in absolute spades is that actually involving young people in a decision-making process doesn't happen massively, and actually overcoming that is it's trickier than it should be. It's harder work than it should be, and there's actually, as Katie was saying, there aren't young people represented on the Yorkshire Dales National Park Board, aren't represented right across any of the national parks, and that's not necessarily because young people can't get involved. It's just because they don't necessarily, because we don't make it easy as national parks and as authorities for young people to get involved. And so there's all these various things going on, as I say, youth forums, but when it actually comes to involving people in the decision-making process, it doesn't necessarily happen. So what I was wanting to do just today, and as Katie said, completely experimental, just an idea off the top of my head, and it was really just to get your feelings on an item on the agenda that's coming up at the authority meeting. We're recording the meeting now, so anything you say, we can, if we think it's gone well enough, we can sort of send this round to the members in advance of the authority meeting, which is in 3 weeks' time. But I just thought what we could do is cover one subject, get your thoughts on that, just talk through it, just comments on it, and then we can relay those thoughts through to the members, and they can take that on board or not take it on board or whatever. So it's completely, as I say, we do what we think's right, and we'll see what comes of it, and we can discuss whether it's right, wrong, or indifferent afterwards. So what we did was we picked an item that's coming up on the agenda at the authority meeting, and that was the Dales Woodland Forum and the strategy. It's been worked on for a couple of years now, and we've arrived at a situation where all we've got to do as a group of members, it'll come up, and we've got to decide whether we adopt it and whether we take that on board, which the likelihood is that we will. But in advance of that decision, we will comment on it and we will discuss what's right. Do we tinker with it slightly? And as Katie says, we can't change it massively, but we can just tinker with it still. And we can put your comments into that, and members can take those on board. So really, you're in exactly the same position as members will be in 3 weeks' time, where this is presented in front of them. Hopefully you've had a read of it. You won't necessarily have read every bit of it, but I just open the floor to you now just to comment on the Dales Woodland Forum, and then at the end we'll probably just take a consensus on whether we think as a group of young people whether it should be adopted, and maybe make a few suggestions of how we could tinker with it if we think we need it. So I open the floor up to you just to discuss the draft Woodland Strategy and see how it will affect you as young people and how you could potentially improve upon it.
Great, thanks, Dale. So, floor is open.
Don't all speak at once.
I'll start if you want. Yeah, I read through it. I think it's really good. I think woodland creation is something we really need to concentrate on for habitat for wildlife, and reducing our carbon and everything like that to do with it. For me, the thing in it that I think we do need to prioritise management of existing woodlands. So I think we go in, start planting up new woodlands and everything, but we haven't got a good management plan in place for the existing ones. So we're just going to fall into the same traps again. So to me, that was a big priority. And also a bit more on managing scrub and marginal areas, because again, they're really significant. The conservation side, that's where your wildlife is going to be. That's integral. And to me, that's just the point that could do with being put in there. So, yeah.
That's
Okay.
cool. Sarah? Yep.
Sarah? And where I think a lot of your viewpoints are relevant is that obviously a lot of you are actually doing work on the ground within woodlands. Just what are your thoughts on it, and how's it gone over the last few years, and you know, how do you think this strategy will fit into your calendar?
Is Callum talking?
On mute, Callum.
Sorry about that. So, at a different point, it was just about which is in here, like woodland pastures and the likes of providing trees as grazing options for the likes of cattle and sheep. And it is mentioned in there that it's useful for can provide different nutrients different times of year. Ash tree were the main pollarded species of trees that we used as crops for cows during bad summers where they couldn't get grass, and the loss of ash trees from the environment would be quite big, I think, more than people have thought about from foraging side, even though it's not taken as seriously as it used to be. Going back to a place in farming where they are seen as a use, but there hasn't been any focus on these ash trees or the elm trees, which are the second best having forage crops, in replacing those sort of trees in our environments yet, which I think really is a point which needs to be made, because the way farming is going with climate change, with things around there, is looking at regenerative farming. So like farming by nature, farming with trees, woodland pastures are going to be more sought after in the future. I think we need to look, and currently subsidies for trees from well, obviously we're leaving Europe, but subsidies currently, the only way to get money from tree planting is to fence those trees off, which to how we want to go forwards, farming alongside nature.
No, I think that's a really good point, and obviously woodland grazing and silvopasture and all those kind of things have become more important and will become more important. And hopefully they could even be brought into the actual elm schemes that's potentially around the corner. So we probably need to look at that, Callum. It's a good point. And I didn't know that they used ash trees to that extent to actually feed animals, particularly through the summer.
There's a really interesting section of St John's in the Vale over in the Lake District. Yeah. Extensive pollarded ash trees where they and it was a main crop, and they would chop them down and store them just as branches for winter crops, and it kept like hay.
Brilliant. Thank you. Thanks, Callum. Luke, did you want to come in?
Yeah, it's just a quick one because I've got to leave. I've got another call. It's having looked through the strategy, I noticed that it does talk about protecting the cultural heritage of the Dales, but that there really needs to be included in there somewhere that tree planting should not be to the detriment of certain archaeological features. It can be quite good to plant certain things, but it can also be very negative depending on the root system that's planted on certain features. And although we're consulted, we have taken a view of stopping where it's very sensitive, but allowing certain sections to be let go, basically certain sections of ridge and furrow. But there's almost a need to maintain the visual aspect of the landscape in certain places where you may not necessarily have an archaeological feature that could be damaged, but that by planting you will damage the ability to experience one of the special qualities of the Dales. So looking at that visual aspect as well as the what's on the ground, the wider landscape impact really is very key for this.
No, I think that's a really important point, and it's good that you brought that in from a cultural heritage perspective. And like you say, it's not just about damaging the particular cultural heritage; it's about that visibility as well. So, yeah, really good point. Thanks for that. I mean, if you do need to leave, Luke, just
I've just got to go now. So thanks, everyone.
No, thanks very much.
See you.
And Abby.
I think it's like great planting all these woodlands and everything, but there needs to be more done for the aftercare of the woodlands. So it's all good and right planting them, but then it's what to do with the tree guards after it, and what to do with the stakes, because somebody's going to have to go back and check all of these, and you can't be expecting landowners to go walk around and check all of it, because they're not going to be awfully keen on that idea. So there needs to be that done, but then also with the plastic, is there going to be that much plastic going for these tree guards? We need to be looking at alternatives to what we can use instead of the plastic. So maybe something like cardboard or something like that instead.
Yeah,
that's an important point, and I know the Friends of the Dales are particularly keen on looking at alternatives to using plastic tree guards. So it is something we need to look at.
Do you want to jump in on that, Neil? Sorry, just following up on that.
Yeah.
I think it was mentioned about looking into alternatives for plastic tree guards, but obviously that's work in progress still. But I know the YDMT have just successfully got some money to look into alternatives for plastic tree shelters. So hopefully that is more of a realistic sort of thing we can sort of expect to see in the near future as well. But yeah, absolutely, yeah, it's really awful when you go through woodlands and all you can see is a carpet of plastic. It's just awful.
Yeah, and as Abby says, you know, that potentially clearing up of those plastic tree guards afterwards is a job and doesn't need to land on the landowner. Rosie.
When I was doing the last consultation, I remember amongst all the swearing and all the rude comments, there was a really, really nice message by someone who made the case for fruit trees in Dales villages and just the wonderful impact they can have on community building, on food production, on health and well-being, and just, while we're thinking about large-scale planting and silviculture and all of that, don't forget domestic planting and how every single tree matters. I thought that was a nice point that I would never have thought of.
Yeah, it's a fair point, and we've sort of looked at that from an environmental group in Malham itself, and actually trying to find land to plant a bit of an orchard, you know, actual orchard itself is pretty tricky. But then somebody says, well, you could get equally as many trees if each person just planted a tree or two trees in their own gardens, then you end up with more trees anyway. So it's a really good point. Thanks, Rosie. Lizzie.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, that's good. I was gonna say about the plastic alternatives, which is great, and I was gonna raise the point about disease and biosecurity within existing woodlands and new woodlands in relation to recreation. I know it did say about biosecurity, but I think it's like a really important point to make with us guys as well as with access to new woodlands, because ash dieback sort of everywhere, and there's a few other diseases that are sort of marching through the Dales. I think like more on the biosecurity issue probably wouldn't go amiss, like more focus on that.
Yeah, okay. Can you just expand on that a bit, please, Lizzie?
Yeah, of course. So I know in Scotland, in a lot of the woodlands up there that have got a lot of public access, they have these I don't know how to describe this. Like every time you go in, you've got to sort of walk over this spongy, like it's got soap and stuff in it that just cleans your boots and things like that for your boots and mountain bikes and things like that. And I think if we're creating big new woodlands or even little woodlands with public access, then that sort of thing should hopefully be included as well, just from a biosecurity point of view.
Fine, thanks, Lizzie. And I've got you down, Katie, with your hand up. Are you wanting to come in, or is that from before?
Make a point about, I didn't see any mention of forest schools or like the education side of things, I know there was something mentioned about the opportunities to improve access and recreation facilities for everyone, but I thought there was nothing that was specifically mentioned about relating to children. I'm not sure whether that would be covered more in an education strategy, but I still think there should have been some sort of mention on that, something about providing leisure activities for children and opportunities to educate children about the value of woodlands, which would hopefully stay with them for later in life. And it's also like well documented the benefits of young children being out in nature, in particular in woodlands, and can improve sort of health and well-being and learning benefits. So that was just my point.
Thanks very much. Abby, did you want to come back in?
Yeah, can I just mention something from Rebecca, because she can't, her mic's not working. The Cumbria Wildlife Trust, they're currently using the cardboard tree guards, so it might be worth just seeing like how they're getting on and how they found them, because obviously they've used them before, so it's like somebody's used them. It'd be interesting to see how they found them.
Yeah, good point. Did you say that was a Cumbria Wildlife Trust, Abby?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, great, thank you. And Callum?
I was just going to say, kill two birds with one stone. Get the school children out into the woodlands to clear up the plastic. There you go. Hey, presto.
That's a good point. Yeah, I'm sure they'll love it. But yeah, no, that's been really useful. I've got Rosie and Katie still their hands up. Is that from previously?
Yeah. Sorry, my bad.
Right, thanks very much. So I don't know whether anybody else has anything to comment on that. That's been a really useful discussion for me, and there's lots of really important points come out of that. I'm sure a lot of them have been kind of considered, but yeah, we can look at that further. Sarah, do you want to come back in?
Yeah, only briefly. It was just about whether you had much dealings with our local. There's got a local group here, Crosby Ravensworth Tree Group, that like Drew runs, and they've just done a fantastic job of surveying the area, getting volunteers to plant. I don't know how aware of it you are, but they're a really good group to chat to then try and expand it to other communities. Because they're just getting the locals to volunteer, it's educating them, it's getting communities together, and it's making them care for that as well. So yeah, just thought I'd make you aware of it.
That's a good point. And there's what was that specifically a tree group then, Sarah?
Yeah, so yeah, they're specifically set up because they were aware that the trees in the area are aging and there's not been a lot of new planting in the past 50 years. So they go around, survey kind of farmers' lands, like the green and things like that, work out what the ages are, let the farmers know about it, make a plan of where to plant, and then get the landowners involved in it. And they've done things like they've planted fruit trees on the green outside and trying to make a little orchard and things like that. It's just a fantastic group.
Yeah, yeah. And I think there are a few of these sort of tree groups, environmental groups, orchard groups, etc. They are cropping up around the national park, and I do think there'd be some value in pulling some of those together. So like you say, they are working together kind of amongst themselves rather than just all working independently. And maybe us as a national park can sort of fulfill that role of bringing it together. So we'll look at that as well. So thanks for that. But it's good to hear the work that they're doing, and it's all the work around the national park by these little groups all adds up to quite a lot. So it's useful stuff. That's brilliant. Thanks very much for that. Like I say, really interesting, and to hear those perspectives is really important for us. So we can vote on this. It's not necessarily an official vote, but we can all just have a raise of hands, which is kind of what we will do in the authority as well. People will have their say, members will have their say as you have done, and then we'll just raise our hands to adopt the Dales Woodland Strategy. So we'll take into account various things like the woodland pasture that Callum spoke about, protecting cultural heritage that Luke spoke about, plastic guards, fruit trees, more biosecurity, and the forest skills. So if we take that on board, are we all happy to adopt this as the Dales Woodland Strategy? And you can just agree and say yes just by raising the electronic hand function. That's brilliant. That's 10 hands. So that's the majority as far as I'm concerned. So that's democracy in action. So we'll suggest that as being approved and adopted by us as a youth forum anyway, and we'll take that forward to the members, and we'll discuss that at the authority in 3 weeks' time. So thanks very much for your help on that. It's much appreciated. And with that, I'll hand back to Katie.